Hi, I'm Andy Klemenko, and I wanted to show everybody how easy it is to install Docker Enterprise and conversely Kubernetes. Today we're going to be basing this off of a cheat sheet that I have developed. It is at github.com/Klemenko/EE_cheat sheet, and I'm going to be adding this in the show notes. And we're going to be building a 3-node cluster today, but typically we recommend a 10-node cluster. Now, here's the nice thing is Docker Enterprise comes with a 30-day free trial license. If you were to click this link, it'll roughly take you to Docker Hub, and there you can register for your 30-day trial license. And I've done that already. And with that, let's actually start building. We do have some recommendations on node sizes, 4 core, 16 gigs of RAM on up with a generous amount of storage. But typically it's either going to be a VM or bare metal, and 4 cores are better and enough memory, you should be good to go. We are going to be installing online. You can install air-gapped, and we do have instructions on how to pull down the RPMs and the container offline bundles if you wanted to. But like I said, we're gonna go online today. So the first thing we need to do is set the export URL. And that'll just simplify some of this little script here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set export URL. And the way you get that URL is you go to your hub account and notice the blue box here at the bottom. I'm going to copy that and paste that in. And what I'm going to do is I've actually SSH'd into all 3 of my nodes. So I'll run that, and run that. Now that we've got that set, now it's just simply a matter of copy and paste. And all we're doing is pulling down the Docker EE repo file. And I'm running CentOS 7.6. And away it goes. I've already done a yum update ahead of time just to simplify some of the process. And as you see, it's going to set up and pull down the necessary packages it needs and the dependencies. There's really only one real dependency, and that's going to be the container SELinux RPM, and that is in the extras channel if you're on Red Hat, or it's just in the CentOS regular channel. Cool. All 3 are working. While that's running, that will take a minute because it's applying the SELinux context to the system. While that's running, I wanted to talk about what else is here on Docker Hub. So we've also got a license key. We're going to need this to register our system. So let's go ahead and save that to the desktop. There's also these download CVE vulnerability databases. If you were to be running this offline air-gapped, you'll want to download the bottom one, 2.2.6, and that's going to be the latest CVE vulnerability database. Now, you will want to do this on a regular basis, unfortunately, because that database is always being updated. Okay, now let's go back here. Now we're going to do some kernel tuning. These are some recommendations that we've put together around networking, around memory, ARP. There's swap. Swap's a good one. And let's go ahead and apply those to all the nodes. So 1, 2, and 3. Now our kernel's tuned on all the nodes. And because we have SELinux enabled, like everyone should, let's go ahead and configure the daemon to enable that and set up a log driver for only 30 megs of log files per container. Run that. Cool. So now we've got the latest Docker Enterprise Engine installed at 18.09.7. We've got it configured. We've got the kernel tuned appropriately. Now let's go ahead and install UCP, our Universal Control Plane, which is our kind of our management plane on top. First thing we need to do, though, is we need to get the forward-facing NIC address. And the reason why we do this is because it's got multiple NICs. Universal Control Plane wants to bind to one of them. We just want to make sure we're binding to the correct externally facing. So in this case, it's 142.78. And then let's run this in interactive mode. Cool. So what it's doing now is it's pulling the image down from Hub, and it's going to run it. It's going to ask us a bunch of questions. Okay, admin username, admin, password. Put in your top secret standard user password, and let it go. Okay, so this will take a few minutes because it's got to pull down a bunch of Docker images from hub.docker.com. And it should be relatively quick because we are online. So let's take a second while that's running. We can talk about configuring Universal Control Plane. Now, other than licensing UCP, there's a lot of things we can do. I'm not going to show you in this video. I'm definitely going to make another video on how to configure some of these subtle nuance things, like adding external certs, configuring LDAP, and setting up high availability. But here's the cool thing. In terms of high availability, we kind of jokingly call this bring your own load balancer, where the manager nodes will know how to set themselves up for high availability. All you need to do is just load balance the front door, and whether you're using an ELB or an F5 or even a well-configured Nginx, it's relatively simple. And this is, and quite literally, all your load balancing is port 443 across all three of the manager nodes. And then all your API interaction and all your GUI interaction are managed through that. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, so we're still pulling. Okay, so now it's asking about additional addresses. So this is kind of important. Out of the box, we really believe in security. We kind of use the term secure by default. Because of this, we automatically generate self-signed certs. Now, right now, my cert will be using the short name 127, 172, and my external IP. If you want to add it a name, just for sanity's sake, or effectively what's known as a subject alternative name, here's the place to do it. In my case, I like using ucp.docker.life. And what this is going to do is it's going to add that URL as a subject alternative name into the cert for Universal Control Plane. So we'll go to it. We'll go to the site in a few minutes, and it will show as invalid because we don't know who the certificate authority is, but it'll look a lot cleaner and it'll just work, which is nice. Okay, while we're waiting for that, a couple of the things. Oh yeah, talking about external certs and configuring LDAP. So let's actually go and pull up the docs on both of those. So you can absolutely use your own external certs. What I recommend doing is build Universal Control Plane, configure the first controller first, and then go and add all the other nodes to the cluster. What I also recommend doing is let the cluster build with self-sign and then go back in and replace the CA, the cert, and the key through the GUI, and it tends to work the best. Same when we talk about configuring LDAP. Once you stood up the first controller, the first manager, go in, configure LDAP, make sure it works, test with external users to log in, and then go ahead and add the rest of your nodes. Pretty straightforward. In case you are looking to automate this, while we're waiting for the first node to come up, at the very bottom of this cheat sheet, I have a script. This is the script I use to build all my demo clusters. And if you want to take a look at it, pay attention to some of the orders of operations. I use DigitalOcean. They've got a really nice CLI, and it just works great. I'm doing the kernel tuning. I'm doing the daemon configs. Could be worth an interesting look. One of the things I also do is I have a function in there called demo that uses the outwardly exposed API to configure teams, users, repos, collections, things like that. I even set up the default for Kubernetes. It's kind of nice. Okay, so our first node is up, and let's go to it. So quite literally on this node, we've run two commands. One was the yum install for Docker Enterprise, and literally the second one was the docker run command to install Universal Control Plane. So let's log in with my super secret password, upload license, and that was that license file we downloaded. Let me go ahead and do Docker subscription. Cool. So now I've got Universal Control Plane, which is also a Kubernetes master, running 3.1.8 in two commands. That's pretty slick. Let's go into the settings real quick, and I'll show you where the LDAP and certificates. So here's the certificates. If I want to change certificates, I would change them here. If I went into authentication and authorization, here's where I could create, configure LDAP and even configure SAML. One of the things that I like doing, since a lot of my customers now are running Kubernetes, it says set orchestrator type for new nodes. I like setting it to Kubernetes. Okay. What this means is that anytime I add a node to the cluster, it'll automatically come in as a Kubernetes node. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's escape out of here. So let's go under shared resources nodes. And notice I just have one node, but here in the upper right, I've got add node. Let's go ahead and click add node. We're going to leave it as a worker. And I've got this Docker swarm join command. All I have to do is copy it, go to my second node, and paste it. That's it. Paste it. So now I'm at 4 commands. Well, 2 per node, right? Pretty simple. 6 commands. Now I've got a 3-node cluster, and this will take a sec. The reason why it's pending is it's got to pull down the all the containers off the internet, in which case it's going to be like kubelet, kubeAPI, stuff like that. So while that's coming down, let's go ahead and start looking at Docker Trusted Registry, because everybody needs a registry. So there's a couple options we have here. We've got a command to run it, and by the time you actually go to this site, I'll remove that version because there's a newer version. But here's another cool thing. If you go into admin settings and you go to Docker Trusted Registry, we actually help guide you through it. So in this case, I'm going to use dtr.docker.life as my external URL. And here's where I can select a node. Now, I typically like selecting my second node, just logically. So it's 857C, 857C. Disable TLS verification because I don't want to pass in the cert. So here's a nice thing. I can now just copy this and run it. So while we've got that in clipboard, let's go back to nodes. Our nodes are coming up, they're green. It'll take a minute to start getting the metrics for each node. And let's go on the second node and let's actually run that command. So it's unable to find DTR locally, so it's pulling it down. Now it's asking for the UCP password. So this is the same, it's actually, inside the container is actually logging into UCP. So we'll give it the same password we set when we configured Universal Control Plane. And that's it. So it's doing a bunch of port checks. It's doing a bunch of health checks. It's making sure that there's plenty of storage, and away it goes. And what it's doing right now is it's pulling down containers from the internet and running them. Now what you'll see, which is interesting, is notice it says Kubernetes, so it's the 857C. It's showing up as a Kubernetes node. This will actually flip over into what's called mixed mode. See, it says orchestrator here. The reason why it's mixed is because we have 2 orchestrators, the manager nodes, aka Universal Control Plane and Docker Trusted Registry, are available for both orchestrators. In other words, you want to be able to manipulate those nodes or pull images to those nodes from those management services. Okay. Let's say hypothetical, you wanted to switch a node from Kubernetes to Swarm or vice versa. It's relatively easy. You go into the node itself, go to the edit button in the upper right, and here's where I can switch it from Swarm to Kubernetes. I can also drain and do some node level activity. If I want to pull the node out of the cluster, I can add labels. This is where you would do it. So we'll give this another sec. It should be done relatively soon. So granted, now it's 7 commands. Let's keep track. 7 commands, and I have a 3-node cluster with Universal Control Plane, and it's finishing up the install for DTR. And also notice the node type also went to mixed. A couple of things to think about is also resourcing. So on each node, I can go into the metrics, and I can start to look at the metrics for each node. Now, granted, we just created it, so we go in the last 30 minutes. We might get a little more data here. Yeah, a little more data. Cool. DTR is done. So the way we'd get to it is bring up a new tab, dtr.docker.life. Let me zoom in and go to advanced, accept. Notice I didn't have to log in. The reason being is because Universal Control Plane and DTR share the same authentication backend. So if I've got LDAP configured or I'm using a local database, it doesn't matter. It just works across both products. Let's go in and look at some of the configuration options real quick. So similar to Universal Control Plane, it comes out of the box with self-signed certs. We can absolutely add externally signed certs at any point in time. If you were running this as a standalone or you want to appear to be standalone, you can disable single sign-on, which means that if I went to DTR without logging into UCP, it would kick me over with it turned on. If not, it would just do a pass-through authentication. So your customers would not know that there was your Universal Control Plane login. This was a heavily requested feature a while back. One of the things that I will say is kind of mandatory in setting up Docker Trusted Registry is going into security and enabling the image scanning engine. And again, you'll set it online or offline according. Let's go ahead and enable that because it'll take a few minutes to download the database. And then here you can go into storage and you can configure whether you're using NFS or cloud. You can use obviously all the object types, S3 and the like, versus NFS. No, I'm using volume mount right now because I'm keeping it simple. A couple of things you may want to look at is garbage collection too. This will help remove any cruff that is created by orphaned images. And one last thing to point out, notice it says API in the lower right. So if you click on that, we'll take you to our Swagger page, which will have all of the API endpoints documented. This is both for Docker Trusted Registry as well as Universal Control Plane, which is really handy to have. Basically, the product is self-documenting. So hopefully you guys have seen that this is probably the easiest Kubernetes install you'll ever do. And I hope you enjoy. Please look forward to more videos. Thanks. Bye.